The dust cloud appeared on the horizon like the wrath of God himself, and Quinn Crawford knew he had maybe 10 minutes before it swallowed the entire town of Florence, Arizona whole. It was late September in 1887, and the desert had been particularly unforgiving that year. Quinn had been checking his horse's shoes outside the livery stable when he spotted the wall of churning sand and debris rolling toward them from the east. The sky had already taken on that sickly yellow hue that preceded the worst storms, and the wind was picking up fast, whipping grit into his eyes and mouth. He grabbed his horse's reins and started leading the animal back toward the stable when he heard a crash followed by a distinctly feminine cry of distress. Quinn's head snapped toward the sound, and his heart jumped when he saw what was happening across the dusty street. A woman's shop sign had torn loose from its moorings, and now ribbons, fabrics, and what looked like half a dozen ladies' hats were tumbling down the wooden walkway like tumbleweeds. The woman herself, dressed in a pale blue dress with her dark hair already coming loose from its pins, was desperately trying to gather the scattered merchandise while the wind fought her for every piece. Quinn didn't hesitate. He quickly secured his horse to the nearest post and ran across the street, dodging a barrel that went rolling past. The dust was already thick enough that he had to squint to see clearly. As he got closer, he could make out more details of the woman's predicament. Her shop door was hanging open, banging violently against the frame, and more items were being sucked out by the wind's greedy fingers. "Madam," Quinn shouted over the howling wind, "you need to get inside. This storm is going to be a bad one." The woman looked up at him with the most striking hazel eyes he had ever seen. Even in the midst of chaos, even with dust streaking her face and panic evident in her expression, she was beautiful. But there was also determination in those eyes, a stubborn set to her jaw that told him she wasn't about to abandon her livelihood without a fight. "I cannot just leave everything," she called back, clutching an armful of partially finished hats to her chest. "This is my entire stock. If I lose these, I lose everything." Quinn understood pride and desperation when he saw it. He had experienced both in his 31 years, especially during the hard times after his father's ranch had failed back in Texas. He nodded sharply and started grabbing whatever he could reach. A green bonnet with silk flowers tried to escape his grasp, but he snatched it back from the wind's clutches. "Get inside and hold the door," he commanded, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when managing cattle during stampedes. "I will get what I can, but you need to make sure that door stays controlled, or we will lose everything that's still in there." The woman hesitated for only a moment before nodding. She rushed back toward her shop, fighting against the wind that seemed determined to push her in the opposite direction. Quinn watched just long enough to make sure she made it safely, then he set to work gathering what he could from the street. The next few minutes were a blur of motion and mounting urgency. Quinn ran back and forth, his arms full of fabrics, hat forms, ribbons, and finished pieces. The wind was a living thing now, a roaring beast that tugged at his clothes and filled his mouth with grit whenever he drew breath. He could barely see 3 feet in front of him as the dust storm's leading edge hit Florence with full force. He made one final dash into the thickening gloom, spotting a large hat box that had wedged itself against a water trough. As he bent to retrieve it, something hard hit him in the shoulder. He grunted but kept moving, tucking the box under his arm like a prized possession. When he finally stumbled through the doorway of the millinery shop, the woman was there immediately, throwing her weight against the door to slam it shut behind him. The sudden relative quiet was startling. Outside, the wind screamed and howled, and they could hear debris pelting the wooden walls like buckshot, but inside was a pocket of unexpected calm. Quinn stood there breathing hard, covered head to toe in dust, holding a slightly crushed hat box. The woman was equally disheveled, her hair now completely loose and hanging past her shoulders in dark waves. Dust streaked her face and dress, and her hands were scraped and bleeding from grabbing at rough wood and fabric. But she was looking around her shop with an expression of profound relief. The small space was packed with the tools and treasures of her trade. Shelves lined the walls, displaying hat forms of different sizes and styles. A work table dominated the center of the room, covered with pins, needles, scissors, and spools of ribbon in every color imaginable. Most importantly, the majority of her stock was still there, safe from the storm's destruction. "Thank you," she said, her voice slightly hoarse from the dust. "Thank you so much. I do not know what I would have done if you had not helped me." Quinn set down the hat box carefully and pulled off his hat, dust cascading from the brim. "It was the right thing to do, madam. Though I have got to say, you took about 10 years off my life with that stunt. When a dust storm like that is coming, you need to forget about property and think about saving your own skin." The woman's chin lifted slightly, and he could see a flash of that stubbornness again. "Easy to say when this is not your livelihood. I came all the way from Philadelphia to make a fresh start here. Everything I own in this world is in this shop. I could not just let it blow away." Quinn studied her more carefully now. Philadelphia. That explained the slight Eastern accent he detected, the refinement in her bearing despite the current state of disarray. She was probably in her mid-20s, and there was something about her that suggested both vulnerability and steel. An interesting combination. "I am Quinn Crawford," he said, offering his hand despite the dust that covered it. "I work at the Double C Ranch about 5 miles north of town." She took his hand without hesitation, her grip surprisingly firm. "Rose Zimmerman, I own this shop. Or at least I hope I still own it once this storm passes. I cannot afford to pay for damages to the building." "The building looks sound enough," Quinn assured her, glancing around. "Old Tom Brennan built most of the structures on this street, and he knew what he was doing. We just need to wait out the storm." As if to punctuate his words, something large crashed against the wall outside, making Rose jump. Quinn instinctively moved closer to her, positioning himself between her and the window, though he knew logically there was nothing he could do if something came crashing through. Rose noticed his protective stance, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. She moved toward the back of the shop, where a small potbelly stove sat cold in the corner. "I was about to make tea when I noticed my sign tearing loose," she said. "I suppose we might as well make the best of being trapped together. The storm could last an hour or more." "Tea sounds mighty fine," Quinn agreed, though he could not remember the last time he had actually drunk tea. Coffee was the lifeblood of ranch work, strong enough to strip paint and hot enough to burn. But watching Rose Zimmerman busy herself with the kettle and tea leaves, trying to restore some normalcy to her upended day, he found himself charmed. While Rose worked at the stove, Quinn took the opportunity to really look at the shop. Everything was neat and organized, or at least it had been before the storm scattered things. The hats on display showed real skill. There were practical sunbonnets for ranch wives, elegant church hats decorated with flowers and feathers, and even a few men's hats that showed creative band work. Each piece had been crafted with care and attention to detail. "You made all these yourself?" he asked. Rose glanced over her shoulder, a small smile playing at her lips. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "Every single one. I apprenticed with a milliner in Philadelphia for 5 years before I decided to strike out on my own. Everyone thought I was insane to come west, but I had my reasons." Quinn heard the weight behind those last words, the hint of a story she was not quite ready to tell. He respected that. Everyone who came west had their reasons, and most of them involved leaving something behind. "Well, from what I can see, you do fine work," he said honestly. "Though I have got to admit, I have not worn anything fancier than a work hat in years." Rose turned to face him fully, tilting her head as she studied him with an assessing gaze that made him feel oddly self-conscious. "That is a shame," she said. "You have good bone structure. A proper hat would suit you." Quinn felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the stove. "Madam, I am just a ranch hand. I do not need anything fancy." "Everyone needs something that makes them feel special," Rose countered. "That is what I try to create, not just hats but confidence. A piece that makes someone stand a little taller, feel a little more themselves." Before Quinn could respond to that unexpectedly philosophical statement, the kettle began to whistle. Rose poured hot water over the tea leaves, and soon the shop filled with the delicate scent of chamomile and something else he could not quite identify. She handed him a delicate china cup that looked absurdly small in his work-roughened hands. They settled into an companionable silence, sipping tea while the storm raged outside. Quinn found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did around people. Most social interactions in town felt like obligations, things to endure before he could get back to the honest work of ranching. But something about Rose's presence felt different. Natural, somehow, despite them being complete strangers trapped together by circumstance. "How long have you been in Florence?" Rose asked after a while. "About 3 years," Quinn replied. "I came out from Texas after my father's ranch went under. Bad drought, worse decisions. I needed to start fresh somewhere new, same as you. Do you like it here?" Quinn considered the question seriously. "I do. Arizona is hard country, but it is honest. You know what you are getting. The work is good at the Double C, and the owner, Charles Carlyle, is fair. I have been saving up, hoping to maybe buy some land of my own one day." "Nothing big, just enough for a small herd." Rose's eyes lit up with interest. "Your own ranch, that is a big dream." "It is," Quinn agreed. "But dreams are what keep us going, right? Otherwise we are just surviving, not living." "I like that," Rose said softly. "I spent too many years just surviving in Philadelphia. I was engaged to a man my father chose, someone appropriate and boring and utterly wrong for me. When he started making demands about giving up my millinery work once we married, I knew I had to leave. So I broke the engagement, sold everything I could, and bought a ticket west. My family has not forgiven me." Quinn heard the pain in her voice, the loneliness of being cut off from family. "Their loss," he said firmly. "Takes real courage to choose your own path." Rose looked at him with those striking hazel eyes, and something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, of two kindred spirits who had chosen difficult roads in pursuit of something authentic. The storm continued to howl, but inside the little millinery shop, a different kind of energy was building. Quinn found himself telling Rose stories about ranch life, about ornery cattle and beautiful sunrises over the desert, about the satisfaction of a hard day's work and the bone-deep exhaustion that followed. Rose, in turn, told him about her craft, about the joy of creating something beautiful with her own hands, about the challenge of building a business in a rough frontier town where most women made their own hats or went without. "It has been harder than I expected," Rose admitted. "Not the work itself, but the loneliness. I have been here for 4 months, and you are the first person who has had a real conversation with me. Most folks are polite but distant. I think they see me as an outsider, Some Eastern lady who will pack up and leave at the first sign of trouble." "Are you?" Quinn asked quietly. "Going to leave at the first sign of trouble?" Rose's jaw set in that determined way he was beginning to recognize. "No, I am not going anywhere. I have put everything I have into this shop, into building a life here. Florence is my home now, whether folks accept me or not." Quinn felt a surge of admiration for her grit. "Then they will come around. You just need time. And maybe you need to let them see who you really are, not just the fancy Eastern milliner." "How do I do that?" Rose asked, and there was genuine vulnerability in the question. "Get involved," Quinn suggested. "There is a church social next month, I think. Show up, talk to people. Let them see you are not looking down on them. Small towns are all about community. Once you are part of that, you will be one of us." Rose nodded slowly, clearly thinking about his words. Before she could respond, a particularly violent gust of wind shook the entire building, and the sound of breaking glass came from somewhere nearby. Rose flinched, moving instinctively closer to Quinn. Without thinking, Quinn put his arm around her shoulders, a gesture of comfort and protection. "It is all right," he said. "Storm is probably at its peak now, should start calming down soon." Rose did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him slightly, accepting the comfort he offered. Quinn could smell the dust in her hair mixed with something floral, lavender maybe, from her soap or perfume. His heart was beating faster than it should, and he told himself it was just the tension of the storm, not the proximity of this intriguing woman. They stayed like that for several minutes, listening to the wind's fury gradually begin to subside. The assault on the walls became less violent, the howling dropped to a lower pitch. Slowly, the worst of it passed. When Quinn finally felt comfortable enough to move away from Rose, he immediately missed the contact. He busied himself walking to the window and carefully wiping away some of the dust that coated the glass. "Looks like the worst has passed," he reported. "Still pretty dusty out there, but the big wind is moving on." Rose joined him at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The street outside was transformed. Everything was coated in a thick layer of brown dust. Debris littered the ground, broken boards, torn fabric, overturned barrels. But the building still stood, and as they watched, a few brave souls emerged from doorways to assess the damage. "I should check on my horse," Quinn said reluctantly. "And I need to get back to the ranch before Mr. Carlyle starts worrying." Rose turned to face him, and her expression was complex. Grateful, certainly, but also something else. Regret, maybe, that their unexpected time together was ending. "I cannot thank you enough for what you did," she said. "You saved my business, probably saved my life." "I do not know how to repay that." Quinn felt embarrassed by her gratitude. "No repayment necessary, madam. It was just the right thing to do." "Rose," she corrected gently. "Please call me Rose. I think we are past formalities now." "Rose," Quinn repeated, liking the feel of her name on his tongue. "And you can call me Quinn." Rose smiled that transforming smile again. "Quinn, it suits you. Strong and straightforward." She walked to one of her shelves and selected a hat. It was a men's style, wider brimmed than his current battered work hat, made of quality felt in a rich brown color. The band was worked leather with a subtle geometric pattern. "I made this on speculation," Rose said, offering it to him. "I thought maybe I could sell men's hats too, but I have not had any takers. I want you to have it, please. I know you said you do not need anything fancy, but it is practical too. Better sun protection than what you are wearing now." Quinn wanted to refuse, but the hope in her eyes stopped him. He took the hat carefully, turning it in his hands. It was beautifully made, the stitching perfect, the felt soft but sturdy. He tried it on, and to his surprise it fit perfectly. "It is like it was made for you," Rose said, her eyes bright. "The fit is perfect." Quinn caught sight of himself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. She was right. The hat did suit him, making him look less like a dusty ranch hand and more like someone of substance. "I cannot accept this," he started, but Rose cut him off. "You can and you will. It is a gift, Quinn. Let me give you something to remember this day by." Quinn met her eyes, and he knew there was no point arguing. Besides, he realized he wanted the hat, not because it was fine quality, though it was, but because it came from her hands. Because it would be a tangible connection to this remarkable woman and this strange, significant day. "Thank you," he said simply. "I will treasure it." Rose's smile widened, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other with an awareness that felt charged with possibility. Then Quinn remembered himself and took a step back. "I really do need to go," he said. "But maybe I could come by again. Check on how you are doing after the storm." "I would like that very much," Rose replied, and the warmth in her voice made Quinn's chest feel tight. They walked to the door together, and Quinn helped her secure it open so she could start cleaning up. Outside, the air was still hazy with suspended dust, but the immediate danger had passed. His horse was exactly where he had left it, looking disgruntled but unharmed. Quinn turned back one more time before mounting. Rose was standing in her doorway, framed by the dusty light, watching him. She raised a hand in farewell, and he tipped his new hat to her before swinging up into the saddle. The ride back to the Double C Ranch took longer than usual because of debris in the road and the reduced visibility from lingering dust. Quinn barely noticed. His mind was full of Rose Zimmerman, her courage in fighting for her merchandise, her vulnerability when she spoke of loneliness, her determination to make a life on her own terms. And those eyes, hazel and expressive, that seemed to see right through his usual reserve. When he finally arrived at the ranch, Charles Carlyle was waiting on the porch of the main house, looking relieved. "There you are, Crawford," the older man said. "Was starting to worry. That was one hell of a storm." "Yes, sir," Quinn agreed. "I got caught in town, had to take shelter." Charles noticed the new hat. "That is a fine piece. Where did you get it?" "A milliner in town made it," Quinn said. "Woman named Rose Zimmerman. Does beautiful work." Charles raised an eyebrow at the enthusiasm in Quinn's voice. The ranch owner was a shrewd man in his 50s, weathered by years of hard work but sharp as ever. "Zimmerman. That is the Eastern woman who opened the hat shop a few months back, right? Heard she keeps to herself mostly." "She is just trying to build her business," Quinn said, feeling oddly defensive. "Takes time to become part of a community." Charles's expression turned knowing. "Sure it does. Well, you better get the horses settled. Storm spooked them pretty good." Quinn spent the next few hours tending to animals and checking for damage around the ranch. The Double C had weathered the storm well, with only minor repairs needed to a section of fence and a shed door that had been torn loose. But even as Quinn worked, part of his mind remained in Florence, in a small millinery shop with a brave, beautiful woman who had looked at him like he was something more than just another ranch hand. That night, lying in his bunk in the ranch hand's quarters, Quinn carefully brushed the dust from his new hat. The other men were already asleep, exhausted from the long day and the work of storm cleanup. In the quiet darkness, Quinn allowed himself to admit something he had been avoiding all afternoon. He was attracted to Rose Zimmerman. More than attracted. In just a couple of hours, she had made an impression that felt significant, like the beginning of something he could not yet name. The next week passed in a blur of work. There was always plenty to do on a ranch, and storm damage added extra tasks to the usual routine. But Quinn found his thoughts drifting to Florence, to Rose. wondering how she was managing, if she was still lonely, if she ever thought about the cowboy who had helped her during the dust storm. On Saturday, Quinn rode into town ostensibly to pick up supplies. The general store was first on his list, but his eyes kept drifting across the street to the millinery shop. Through the window, he could see Rose helping a customer, gesturing animatedly as she showed the woman different ribbons. Quinn completed his errands, then found himself crossing the street before he had consciously decided to do so. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Rose looked up from her customer. Her face brightened immediately. "Quinn," she said, genuine pleasure in her voice. "What a wonderful surprise." The customer, an older rancher's wife named Martha Stevens, looked between them with open curiosity. Quinn tipped his hat politely to both women. "Afternoon, ladies," he said. "Just came by to see how you made out after the storm, Rose." "Very well, thanks to you," Rose replied. She turned to Martha. "Mrs. Stevens, this is Quinn Crawford. He is the one who helped me save my shop during the dust storm last week." Martha's expression shifted from curiosity to warm approval. "Is that so? Well, that is just like you, Quinn. Always were a helpful young man. Your mother would be proud, God rest her soul." Quinn felt uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what anyone would do, madam." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "Most folks would have looked after themselves and left a woman to fend alone. You did good." She turned back to Rose. "I will take the blue bonnet, dear, and the pink ribbons. They will be perfect for my granddaughter's birthday." While Rose wrapped the purchase, Martha continued to chat, and Quinn noticed something different about the interaction. There was a warmth there that had not been present before, an acceptance of Rose as more than just the Eastern outsider. Word of how he had helped her must have spread, and apparently it had changed how at least some folks viewed the milliner. After Martha left, Rose turned to Quinn with a smile that made his heart skip. "You were right," she said. "People have been friendlier this week. I think your help during the storm gave me some credibility, like I passed some kind of test." "You passed it by staying and fighting for what was yours," Quinn said. "I just helped a little." Rose moved closer, reaching up to adjust his hat slightly. The gesture was intimate, familiar, and Quinn held very still, hyper-aware of her proximity. "It is not just a little," she said softly. "You changed everything for me, Quinn. Before that day, I was starting to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake coming here. Now I feel like maybe I can actually belong." Her hand lingered near his face for a moment before she seemed to realize what she was doing and stepped back, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Sorry," she murmured. "I just noticed the hat was sitting a bit crooked." "It is fine," Quinn said, his voice rougher than usual. "Rose, I was wondering if maybe you would like to have dinner with me sometime. There is a decent restaurant on the edge of town, or we could do a picnic if the weather cooperates." Rose's eyes widened, and he could see surprise and pleasure warring in her expression. "I would like that very much," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow," Quinn suggested, feeling unusually bold. "If you do not have other plans, tomorrow is perfect," Rose agreed. "The shop is closed on Sundays anyway." They made arrangements for Quinn to pick her up at noon, and as he left the shop, Quinn felt lighter than he had in years. He was not naive about relationships. He had courted a girl back in Texas before his world had fallen apart, and he knew the steps of attraction and building something real. But this felt different. Faster, somehow, like they had skipped past the awkward early stages and landed somewhere more substantial. That night, Quinn found himself nervous in a way he had not been since he was a young man. He cleaned and mended his best shirt, polished his boots, and spent an embarrassing amount of time debating which of his 2 pairs of pants looked better. When the other ranch hands noticed his preparations, they teased him mercilessly. "Got yourself a sweetheart, Crawford," one of them called out. "Just taking a lady to dinner," Quinn replied, trying to sound casual. "The Milliner lady?" another asked. "Heard you played hero during the dust storm." Quinn ignored them, but he could not quite suppress a smile. Let them tease. He did not care. Sunday dawned clear and warm. Perfect weather for a picnic. Quinn had decided on that option rather than the restaurant, thinking Rose might appreciate something more private given that the whole town seemed to be gossiping about them already. He packed a basket with food he had convinced the ranch cook to prepare, borrowed a blanket, and rode into Florence with his heart beating faster than it should. Rose was ready when he arrived, wearing a simple green dress that brought out the lighter flecks in her hazel eyes. Her hair was pinned up elegantly, and she wore a straw hat that she had clearly made herself, decorated with ribbon that matched her dress. "You look beautiful," Quinn said honestly, and Rose's smile was radiant. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." They rode out of town together, Rose sitting behind Quinn on his horse since he had not thought to bring a buggy. She held onto his waist, and Quinn was intensely aware of every point where their bodies touched. They talked easily as they rode, Rose pointing out different plants and asking their names, Quinn telling her about the land and the people who lived on it. He took her to one of his favorite spots, a place where a rare spring fed a small grove of cottonwood trees. It was an oasis in the harsh desert landscape, green and peaceful and relatively cool. They spread the blanket in the shade, and Quinn unpacked the food while Rose looked around with delight. "This is wonderful," she said. "I had no idea places like this existed out here. It is like a secret garden." "Most folks do not know about it," Quinn admitted. "The spring runs underground most of the way, only surfaces here. I found it by accident a year ago when I was tracking a lost calf." They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Rose told him more about her life in Philadelphia, about growing up in a wealthy family where appearances mattered more than happiness, about discovering her passion for millinery, and the way it had been dismissed as a harmless hobby, until she tried to make it her life's work. Quinn shared his own history of childhood on a struggling Texas ranch, a father who worked himself into an early grave trying to hold onto land that was never meant to support cattle, a mother who had died of fever when he was just 17. He told her about the years of drifting after the ranch was sold for debts, doing odd jobs across Texas and New Mexico before landing at the Double C. "You think you will stay?" Rose asked. "At the ranch, I mean," Quinn considered the question. "For now. Mr. Carlyle has been good to me and I am learning a lot about ranch management. But yes, I still hope to have my own place someday. Something small but mine. A place where I make the decisions and live with the consequences." "I understand that completely," Rose said. "That is exactly why I left Philadelphia. I needed to be in control of my own life, my own choices, even if those choices are harder than what I left behind." They fell into comfortable silence, lying back on the blanket and watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky. Quinn was hyper-aware of Rose beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body in the cool shade. "Quinn," Rose said softly, breaking the silence, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really help me that day? During the storm, I mean." "You could have just secured your horse and taken shelter. You risked yourself for a stranger's property." "Why?" Quinn thought about how to answer. "I guess because you needed help and I was there to give it. But also, I saw something in you that I recognized. That determination not to give up, not to let circumstances defeat you. I have felt that way my whole life. Seemed wrong not to help someone who was fighting so hard." Rose turned her head to look at him, and Quinn found himself drowning in those hazel eyes. "You are a good man, Quinn Crawford," she said. "Better than you probably give yourself credit for." "I am just a cowboy trying to make an honest living," Quinn protested. "You are more than that," Rose insisted. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You are kind and brave and thoughtful. You listened to me when I spoke, really listened, not just waited for your turn to talk. You saw me as a person, not just a woman or an Eastern outsider." "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Quinn sat up too, suddenly needing to be on more equal ground. They were very close now, their faces only inches apart. He could see the individual lashes framing her eyes, the slight flush on her cheeks, the curve of her lips. "Rose," he said, his voice low, "I think I should tell you that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the storm. I know we have only known each other a short time, but there is something here, something real. I feel it, and I think you do too." Rose's breath hitched. "I do," she whispered. "From the moment you came running through that dust to help me, I felt it. Like something inside me recognized something in you. It is crazy, I know. I came here to be independent, to build a life on my own. I was not looking for this." "Neither was I," Quinn admitted. "But maybe the best things are the ones we do not plan for." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her cheek in his rough hand. Rose leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. When she opened them again, they were full of emotion. "Kiss me," she whispered. Quinn needed no further invitation. He closed the small distance between them and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. Rose's hand came up to rest on his chest, and he could feel his own heart hammering beneath her palm. The kiss tasted of the sweet tea they had drunk with lunch and something else, something uniquely Rose that Quinn knew he would crave forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want to rush this," he said. "But I need you to know that I am serious about you, about us. This is not just a passing fancy for me." "For me either," Rose said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know it is fast. I know we should be more sensible. But Quinn, I have spent my whole life being sensible, doing what was expected, following rules that never made sense to me. For once, I want to follow my heart. And my heart is telling me that you are something special." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the spring, talking and stealing kisses, learning each other through touch and word. Quinn told Rose about his dreams for his future ranch, describing it in detail, the house he wanted to build, the type of cattle he would raise, the life he hoped to create. Rose shared her own ambitions, talking about expanding her shop, maybe hiring an assistant someday, becoming known for quality work that drew customers from miles around. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange, they reluctantly packed up their picnic. The ride back to Florence felt too short, both of them wanting to stretch the day out longer. When Quinn helped Rose down from his horse in front of her shop, he kept his hands on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Can I see you again soon?" he asked. "I would be disappointed if you did not," Rose replied. She stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for today, Quinn. It was perfect." Quinn watched her go inside before turning his horse toward the ranch. His face hurt from smiling, and he felt almost giddy, like a schoolboy after his first successful courting. It was a feeling he had thought long behind him, but Rose had awakened something he had nearly forgotten: hope for a future that included more than just work and solitary dreams. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Quinn found reasons to come to Florence whenever he could, stopping by Rose's shop to say hello, taking her to dinner, going on rides into the desert to show her hidden beauties of the landscape. Rose's business continued to grow, word of her skill spreading beyond Florence to the surrounding ranches and settlements. She was busy and tired much of the time, but her eyes always lit up when Quinn appeared. They drew attention, of course. A small town had little else to entertain it besides the romantic lives of its residents, but most of the gossip was benign, even approving. Quinn Crawford was well liked and respected. Rose Zimmerman had proven herself during the dust storm and in the weeks after. People thought they made a good match. Not everyone was pleased, however. About 6 weeks after that first picnic, Quinn encountered trouble in the form of Wade Bishop, a local rancher's son with more money than sense and a reputation for getting what he wanted. Quinn was in the general store picking up supplies when Wade sauntered in, loud and confident in the way of men who had never really been told no. He was younger than Quinn by several years, probably only 24 or 25, and handsome in a slick way that Quinn instinctively distrusted. "Hey there, Crawford," Wade said, his tone friendly but with an edge. "Heard you have been spending a lot of time with the Hat Lady." Quinn stiffened but kept his voice even. "Rose is a friend of mine. Is there a point to this conversation?" Wade's smile widened. "Just curious is all." "She is a pretty thing, that Eastern girl. Was thinking about paying her a visit myself, see if she would make me one of those fancy hats." "I am sure she would appreciate the business," Quinn said carefully. "Oh, I am interested in more than business," Wade said, dropping any pretense of subtlety. "Figure a woman like that, all alone out here, she must get lonely. Could probably use a man with real prospects, not just a ranch hand scraping by." Quinn felt anger flare hot and fast. "You need to watch what you say about Rose." "Or what?" Wade challenged, stepping closer. "You going to fight me over some woman you have got no claim on? Last I checked, I did not see a ring on her finger." Before Quinn could respond, the store owner, old Henry Davis, intervened. "That is enough, Wade. Take your business elsewhere if you are just here to start trouble." Wade laughed but backed off. "No trouble, Henry, just making conversation." He tipped his hat mockingly at Quinn. "See you around, Crawford. May the best man win." After Wade left, Henry shook his head. "That boy is nothing but problems. You watch yourself around him, Quinn. His daddy has money and influence, and Wade knows it." "I will be careful," Quinn promised, but his mind was already racing. He needed to talk to Rose to understand where they stood. Wade was right about one thing: Quinn had no formal claim on her. They had been courting, yes, but they had not talked about the future in concrete terms. What if Rose decided she wanted someone with more to offer than a cowboy's dreams? That evening, Quinn rode straight to Florence after finishing his work. He found Rose in her shop, working by lamplight on an elaborate hat for some wealthy rancher's wife. She looked up when he entered, and her tired expression transformed into joy. "Quinn, I was not expecting you tonight." "I needed to see you," Quinn said. He pulled off his hat and turned it nervously in his hands. "Rose, we need to talk." Her expression turned concerned. "That sounds serious. What is wrong?" Quinn took a deep breath. "I ran into Wade Bishop today. He made it clear he is interested in courting you. Said some things that made me realize we have never really talked about what this is between us. Where we are heading." Rose set down the hat she had been working on and came around the table to stand in front of him. "What do you want it to be?" she asked quietly. "I want everything," Quinn said honestly. "I want you to be mine and me to be yours. I want to court you properly with the intention of marriage. I want to build that ranch I have been dreaming about and have you there beside me, making it a home instead of just a property." "But Rose, I do not have much to offer right now. I have some savings and big plans, but Wade Bishop is right that I am just a ranch hand. If you want someone with more security, more status, I would understand." Rose reached up and placed her hand on his cheek, making him look at her. Her eyes were shining with emotion. "Quinn Crawford, you are an absolute fool if you think I care about money or status. I left all of that behind in Philadelphia, remember? What I want is exactly what you want, a partner who sees me as an equal. Someone who respects my work and supports my dreams while building their own. Someone kind and honest and true." "Rose," Quinn breathed. "You are the perfect fit for me," Rose said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "Do you understand? From that first day when you ran through a dust storm to help me, I knew. You are exactly who I have been waiting for my whole life without knowing it. I do not care if we have to start small or work hard or struggle. As long as we are together, that is all that matters." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I love you," he said, the words spilling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it is fast and maybe crazy, but I love you, Rose Zimmerman." Rose pulled back just enough to look up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," she said. "So much it scares me sometimes." They kissed then, deep and passionate, sealing their declarations with physical connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn knew what he needed to do. "I am going to talk to Mr. Carlyle tomorrow," he said, "about my plans to buy land. See if he has any advice or maybe knows of properties for sale. I have been saving for 3 years, and I think I have enough for a down payment on something small. Nothing fancy, but a start." "We do not have to rush," Rose said, though her eyes were bright with excitement. "I am not going anywhere, I know," Quinn said. "But I am 31 years old and I have been drifting long enough. I want to put down roots, build something lasting, and I want to do it with you." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, their words tumbling over each other in excitement. Rose talked about how she could continue her millinery business even after they married, maybe even expand it. Quinn described the kind of ranch he wanted to build, modest but sustainable, focusing on quality over quantity. They dreamed together, their separate visions merging into something shared and beautiful. True to his word, Quinn approached Charles Carlyle the next day. The ranch owner listened to Quinn's carefully prepared speech about wanting to buy land and start his own small ranch. When Quinn finished, Charles leaned back in his chair and studied him thoughtfully. "Been wondering when you would get around to this," Charles said finally. "You have been a good worker, Crawford, one of the best hands I have ever had. Honestly, I will hate to lose you, but I respect a man who wants to build something of his own." "I was hoping to stay on until I have everything set up," Quinn said. "Could be months before I am ready to make the move." Charles nodded. "That is fair. And as it happens, I might be able to help you more than you know. You are familiar with the northwest section of my property. Where that spring is." Quinn's heart jumped. He knew exactly where Charles meant, the place he had taken Rose on their first picnic. "Yes, sir. That section has never been much use to me," Charles continued. "Too far from the main house, and the water source is not reliable enough for a large herd. But for a small operation, it might work well. I have been thinking about selling it off for a while now. If you are interested, we could work out a deal. Fair market price, but I would give you favorable terms on payment." Quinn felt like the world had suddenly opened up. "Mr. Carlyle, I do not know what to say. That land would be perfect." "Think about it," Charles said. "Talk it over with that young lady of yours. If you want to move forward, we will get a proper survey done and draw up papers." Quinn left the meeting feeling like he was walking on air. That evening, he rode straight to Florence to tell Rose. Her reaction was everything he hoped for, squealing with excitement and throwing her arms around him right there in the shop, propriety forgotten. "This is really happening," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are really going to do this." "We are," Quinn confirmed. "Rose, I want to do this right. I want to ask you properly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small garnet stone, not expensive, but honest and beautiful in its simplicity. "Quinn," Rose whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Rose Zimmerman," Quinn said, dropping to one knee right there in the middle of her shop. "You came into my life like a force of nature, and you have turned everything upside down in the best possible way. You are brave and talented and stubborn and absolutely perfect. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Rose said immediately, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed, laughing against each other's lips, giddy with joy and possibility. Outside, the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, as if the universe itself was celebrating their commitment. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Quinn worked with Charles Carlyle to finalize the land purchase, signing papers that made him a property owner for the first time in his life. The parcel was 200 acres, modest by ranching standards, but it included that precious spring and enough grazing land for a starter herd of perhaps 50 cattle. While Quinn worked on the land during every spare moment, building a small cabin and essential structures, Rose continued to grow her business. Word of their engagement spread, and suddenly she found herself busier than ever. It seemed like every woman in Florence and the surrounding area wanted a hat made by the milliner who had captured the heart of well-liked Quinn Crawford. They decided to marry in early spring, giving Quinn time to get the cabin finished and the first round of cattle purchased. Rose threw herself into making her own wedding dress, a beautiful creation in ivory silk with delicate embroidery. She also made Quinn a new vest, expertly tailored to fit him perfectly. The wedding took place on a warm April morning in 1888 at the small church in Florence. Nearly the entire town turned out for the ceremony. Quinn stood at the altar in his new vest and his best pants, freshly scrubbed and nervous. When Rose appeared at the back of the church on the arm of Charles Carlyle, who had agreed to give her away in the absence of her own family, Quinn felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was stunning, moving down the aisle with grace and confidence, her eyes locked on his. When she reached him and took his hands, Quinn felt like the luckiest man alive. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They spoke their vows clearly, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed Rose with such tenderness that several women in the congregation got misty-eyed. The reception was held at the town hall, with tables laden with food that the community had contributed. There was music and dancing, laughter and celebration. Wade Bishop made a brief appearance, staying just long enough to congratulate them with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes before leaving. Quinn barely spared him a thought. He was too busy dancing with his wife, the words still new and wonderful on his tongue. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Quinn and Rose slipped away. They rode out to their new home, the cabin Quinn had built with his own hands. It was small and simple, just 3 rooms, but it was solid and weatherproof, and most importantly, it was theirs. Quinn carried Rose over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. Inside, someone, probably Martha Stevens and some of the other ranch wives, had decorated. There were wildflowers in jars on the table and fresh linens on the bed. A fire had been laid in the stone fireplace, ready to light. "Home," Rose said softly, looking around with shining eyes. "Our home." "Our home," Quinn agreed. He set her down gently and took her face in his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Crawford." "And I love you, Mr. Crawford," Rose replied, "now and always." That night they consummated their marriage, coming together with a mixture of passion and tenderness that felt right and good and true. Afterwards, lying tangled together in their marriage bed, Quinn felt a peace he had never known before. He had a home, a wife, a future full of promise. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed about was finally real. The next few years were not easy, but they were good. Ranching was hard work, especially on a small operation where every animal mattered, and there was no room for major losses. Quinn worked from dawn until well past dusk most days, tending cattle, maintaining fences, improving the property bit by bit. Rose kept her millinery business going, working from a small room Quinn had added to the cabin. She took orders from towns all around the territory, building a reputation that brought in steady income. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. Rose learned to help with ranch work when needed, despite her Eastern upbringing. She could mend fences, treat minor cattle injuries, and even deliver a calf in an emergency. Quinn, in turn, learned to appreciate the artistry of her craft, often providing feedback on her designs and helping with the business side of her work. Their first winter as a married couple was particularly challenging. A severe cold snap killed 3 of their cattle, a significant loss for their small herd. Quinn took it hard, blaming himself for not being better prepared, but Rose refused to let him wallow in guilt. "This is part of ranching," she said firmly, holding him close on a bitter cold night. "You could not have prevented it. We learn from it and do better next time. We are building something, Quinn, and building takes time and sometimes involves setbacks. We will get through this together." Her faith in him, in them, gave Quinn the strength to push through. By spring, they had recovered, and Quinn made a good profit selling yearlings. He reinvested every penny back into the ranch, slowly but steadily growing their operation. In the summer of 1889, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinn on a warm evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and purple. Quinn's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, then immediately became worried about her health and whether she had been working too hard. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Rose laughed. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time, Quinn. I will be fine." But Quinn fussed over her anyway, taking on even more of the work to spare her, insisting she rest more than she thought necessary. Rose tolerated his overprotectiveness with amused patience, knowing it came from love. Their son was born in early March of 1890, arriving on a night when spring storms rattled the windows and lightning lit up the desert sky. The local midwife, an experienced woman named Anna Reeves, helped Rose through a long but ultimately successful labor. When Quinn was finally allowed into the room and saw his son for the first time, he wept openly. They named him Thomas Charles Crawford, after Quinn's father and the man who had helped make their dream possible. Thomas, or Tommy as he quickly became known, was a healthy, vocal baby with his mother's hazel eyes and his father's dark hair. Parenthood changed them both in profound ways. Quinn discovered reserves of tenderness he had not known he possessed, spending hours just holding his son, marveling at the tiny perfect features. Rose balanced motherhood with her work, often sewing with Tommy sleeping in a basket at her feet. They were tired all the time, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from building a life filled with purpose and love. As Tommy grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to expand. Quinn made smart purchases, growing their herd strategically. He developed a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing, which brought him respect in the ranching community. Rose's millinery business also flourished. She had started training a young woman from town as an assistant, which allowed her to take on more orders while still having time for her family. By 1892, when Tommy was 2 years old, the Crawford Ranch was thriving. It was still small compared to operations like the Double C, but it was profitable and growing. Quinn had added onto the cabin, giving them more living space and a proper workshop for Rose. They had saved enough to feel secure, to plan for the future without the constant worry of one bad year destroying everything. One evening, as they sat together on their expanded porch watching Tommy play in the yard, Rose leaned against Quinn's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if that dust storm had never happened?" she asked. Quinn considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I cannot really imagine it. That storm brought us together. In a way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Me too," Rose agreed. She turned to look up at him, her hazel eyes full of love. "You saved me that day, Quinn, not just my shop but me. I was so lonely, so uncertain if I had made the right choice coming west. And then you appeared like something out of a dream, this brave, kind man who risked himself for a stranger. You changed my entire life." Quinn kissed her forehead tenderly. "You changed mine too. I was just drifting before I met you, working towards some vague dream of my own place but not really living. You made everything real. You made it all mean something." "You are still the perfect fit for me," Rose said softly, echoing the words she had spoken years before. "Every single day I am grateful that you are mine." "And you are mine," Quinn replied. "My perfect fit, my home." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their son play and the sun sink lower toward the horizon. The desert evening was peaceful, marked only by the sounds of cattle in the distance and Tommy's happy babbling as he chased a butterfly. In the years that followed, the Crawford family continued to grow and thrive. Rose gave birth to twin daughters in 1894, a joyful chaos that turned their household upside down in the best possible way. Emma and Charlotte were identical, with dark curls and their father's strong features. Tommy adored his little sisters, taking his role as big brother very seriously. The ranch expanded as well. By 1898, they had nearly 200 head of cattle and had purchased an additional 100 acres adjacent to their original property. Quinn employed 2 full-time ranch hands now, and Rose's millinery business had grown large enough that she had 3 assistants. They had built a proper house to replace the original cabin, a sturdy 2-story structure with enough room for their growing family. Despite their success, they never lost sight of what mattered most. Quinn still took time every day to tell Rose he loved her, to show appreciation for all she did. Rose supported Quinn's dreams while pursuing her own, maintaining the partnership that had been the foundation of their relationship from the beginning. They watched their children grow with pride and joy. Tommy showed an aptitude for ranching, often riding out with his father to check on the herd. The twins, while very young, already showed distinct personalities. Emma was bold and adventurous, Charlotte more thoughtful and artistic. Rose taught all 3 children to read and write, giving them an education she hoped would open doors for whatever futures they chose. On a warm September evening in 1899, Quinn and Rose sat on their porch once again, this time joined by Tommy, now 9 years old, and the 5-year-old twins. It had been 12 years since the dust storm that had brought them together. "Tell us again how you met Mama," Emma demanded, as she often did. The story of the dust storm had become family legend. Quinn and Rose exchanged amused glances. "Well," Quinn began, "it was the biggest dust storm Florence had seen in years. The sky turned yellow, and the wind howled like a banshee." As Quinn recounted the tale, With Rose occasionally interjecting corrections or additional details, the children listened with rapt attention. They never tired of hearing how their parents had found each other, how a disaster had become the beginning of their family story. When the story ended, as it always did, with Rose declaring that Quinn was the perfect fit for her, Charlotte asked seriously, "Do you still think Papa is perfect, Mama?" Rose looked at Quinn, taking in the lines that had deepened around his eyes, the silver that was just starting to show in his dark hair, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work. She saw the man who had run through a dust storm for her, who had believed in her when she felt most alone, who had built a life with her through determination and love. "Every single day," Rose said, reaching over to take Quinn's hand. "Your father is the perfect fit for me. He always has been, and he always will be." Quinn raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And you for me," he said quietly. Tommy made a face at the display of affection, which made his sisters giggle. But underneath his 9-year-old embarrassment, he understood something important. His parents loved each other deeply and truly. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch or business, but a family filled with love and respect and joy. As the years continued to pass, the Crawford legacy grew. Tommy eventually took over the ranch, expanding it further while maintaining the quality standards his father had established. Emma married a lawyer and moved to Tucson, where she became involved in women's suffrage efforts. Charlotte, true to her artistic nature, became a painter whose works celebrated the beauty of the Arizona desert. Rose continued her millinery work well into her 60s, becoming something of a legend in the territory. Women came from hundreds of miles away to purchase her creations, and she trained dozens of young women in the craft over the years. She never forgot how her work had given her independence and purpose, and she made sure to pass that message along to every girl who apprenticed with her. Quinn remained active on the ranch until his 70s, though he gradually handed over more responsibilities to Tommy and the younger ranch hands. He never lost his love for the land, for the simple satisfaction of a hard day's work and cattle thriving under his care. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1913, the entire Crawford family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Tommy was there with his wife and 3 children. Emma came from Tucson with her husband and 2 sons. Charlotte arrived from Santa Fe with her artist husband. The house was filled with noise and laughter, 3 generations under one roof. That evening, after the younger children had been put to bed, and the adults were relaxing with coffee and conversation, Quinn asked for everyone's attention. "I just want to say something," he began, somewhat embarrassed by the sudden spotlight. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Rose took a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than resources, and together we built all of this." He gestured around them. "This family, this land, this life, I could not be more grateful or more proud." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Quinn Crawford, you stop that right now before you make me cry in front of everyone." "Too late, Mama," Emma said with a laugh, wiping at her own eyes. "What I want all of you to know," Quinn continued, looking at his children and grandchildren, "is that the secret to all of this is simple. Find someone who fits with you, who makes you better than you could be alone, someone you respect and who respects you back. Build your life together, brick by brick, day by day. That is what your mother and I did, and I would not change a single moment of it. Even the dust storm," Tommy asked with a grin. "Especially the dust storm," Quinn said firmly. "That storm brought me the greatest blessing of my life." Rose stood and crossed to her husband, kissing him softly in front of their assembled family. "The perfect fit," she whispered against his lips. "The perfect fit," Quinn agreed. The years that followed were gentle ones. Quinn and Rose grew old together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They became grandparents many times over, their descendants spreading across Arizona and beyond. The original ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding to the legacy. On a warm spring day in 1925, Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 63. Quinn was devastated by the loss, feeling as if part of himself had been torn away. But he took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the proof all around him of the life they had built together. He lived another 3 years, dying just shy of his 81st birthday in 1928. Those who knew him said he had never quite recovered from Rose's death, that some essential light had gone out of him when she left. His final words, spoken to Tommy at his bedside, were about Rose and the dust storm that had brought them together. "Tell the young ones," he whispered, his voice fading. "Tell them how we found each other. Tell them about the perfect fit." Tommy promised he would, and he kept that promise. The story of Quinn and Rose Crawford, the cowboy and the milliner who had found love in the midst of a dust storm, became part of family legend. It was told and retold, passed down through the generations. The ranch they had built together remained in the Crawford family for over a century. The house Quinn had constructed was eventually replaced with a more modern structure, but the original cabin, the first home he had built for Rose, was carefully preserved. It became a family museum of sorts, filled with artifacts from their life together: Rose's millinery tools, Quinn's worn work gloves, photographs and letters, the hat Rose had given Quinn during the dust storm, carefully maintained and protected under glass. Visitors to the Crawford Ranch could walk the same land that Quinn and Rose had walked, see the spring where they had their first picnic, stand in the place where Quinn had proposed. The story of their love, of how two people from different worlds had found each other and built something beautiful, inspired generations. Because in the end, that was their true legacy. Not the successful ranch or the millinery business, not the children and grandchildren who carried their names and their blood. Their real legacy was the proof that love, true love, could flourish anywhere. That two people who fit together perfectly could overcome any obstacle, weather any storm. Quinn Crawford had run through a dust storm to help a stranger, and in doing so had found his home. Rose Zimmerman had chosen to stay and fight for her dream, and had discovered something even better than independence: partnership with someone who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her all the more for it. They had been, from that first chaotic meeting until their last days, the perfect fit. And that perfect fit had created a love story that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of choosing each other every single day through whatever storms life might bring. Their story ended as all good stories should, not with a dramatic flourish or tragic separation, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well tended, and a legacy that would echo through time. The dust storm that had brought them together had long since passed, but what it had created would last forever. In Florence, Arizona, in that small patch of desert that had witnessed their beginning, their middle and their end, the wind still blew as it always had. But now it carried their story with it, whispering to anyone who would listen about a cowboy and a milliner, a dust storm and a love that proved to be, indeed, the perfect fit.